when emotional regulation will help your child to stop hitting and when it won't. My name's Jodie Thornton, and I want to talk about this as a concept or as a strategy that sometimes people talk about as a way to get your child to stop hitting. And so the very first thing I want to say is that when most people talk about emotional regulation, what they mean is ignoring your own feelings. And what that would look like is anything where we are distracting a child from their feelings. So let's say they're upset because their sibling has smashed their Lego tower, right? If you're using breathing techniques as a way to get them to not be upset about the tower, then that's emotional distraction, not emotional regulation, right? And I should actually clarify that. Emotional regulation, by definition, is being able to control your emotional response, right? But that in and of itself does not mean that we are not also distracting ourselves or repressing our feelings. And so ultimately, it is emotional regulation if we're using something to distract or push down our feelings. But if we look at what we want our children to be able to do in the full scope of emotional awareness and emotional competence, we actually don't want them to be distracting themselves or repressing their feelings as a default. We might need to use it as a default if you think about in an adult situation. If you're in a job interview and you recall something that's really upsetting, you might wish to push those feelings down and deal with them again when the interview is over. Or you might also choose not to, but either way. But you can see how it is a helpful skill to have in those times where we do want to put the feelings aside for the situation that we're in. The key, though, is that what most of us have been told is regulation is then you just don't come back to it. Like that those feelings are gone and you don't need to worry. What we want to be able to do is come back to those feelings. So if we look at this in the context of a child hitting, if a person means we want to be able to turn the feelings down or off so as they don't need to take any action about those feelings, then yes, that will stop the hitting, but at what cost, right? We are giving our children a default strategy of pushing the feelings down, right? And that's not what we want in the long term. And so what we want to look at is if we are thinking about emotional regulation as improving your baseline regulation. So as an example, if things are really busy and then you add in some time to meditate, that will improve your baseline regulation during this time where things are really busy. And that means that you can get through this period that's really hard, give yourself more emotional space. And for a child that's hitting, it can be really useful to improve their baseline regulation because it gives them a longer fuse so that they actually have a chance to choose a different behavior rather than hitting. And it also can mean that they don't get overwhelmed, so then the impulse to hit doesn't come. But what we don't want to do is say then they're not hitting anymore, problem solved, right? Because then the focus is only on, are they negatively impacting other people, which is obviously very important, particularly with physical aggression. However, it's also really important that we figure out a way to help our children recognize those feelings and solve the problem. So if we go back to the smashed Lego tower, what does the child need to feel better about this? Do they need a place to make their Lego creations that their sibling cannot reach? If it's an older sibling, do they need to have a conversation with that sibling to explain that really hurt their feelings? Do they need some help in recreating what they were up to, right? There's all these different solutions, and what's right for your child will only come through the emotional awareness and communication skills to unpack why is this important to them and what solution would work for them, right? And so that's where we want to be really, really careful that we're not two things. One, we're not using emotional regulation to repress feelings. And two, is that when we're addressing a child's hitting, we don't want to stop at, great, you're no longer impacting other people. And you see this with that phrase, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hit. What we are saying with that, we don't mean to be, but what we're saying with that is it's fine for you to be upset. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, we don't have to do anything about that. We only have to do something about the fact that you're negatively impacting other people, right? And that's why that phrase doesn't work, is because we're basically saying that you being in distress is not something that we need to do anything about. And that's not true, right? Them being in distress is something that we want to take seriously, and we want to solve the root cause of the problem. Now, in another instance, if we look at a child who is hitting not because they're emotionally overwhelmed, but because they want the other person to do what they want, like they're trying to get what they want and they're doing it by hitting. Now, some people will say that a child will only ever hit if they're emotionally dysregulated, and I disagree with that. I've seen children who are hitting because they think it's an effective way to get what they want. And so if you're emotionally regulating, in that case, like, you may find that a child is more able to cope with not getting what they want, and so therefore they won't hit. That might work, but again, it comes back to this idea that ultimately what we need is for a child to be aware of what their emotions are telling them and talk about it and find a solution to the root cause of the problem. So ultimately, when we have a child who's hitting, I do recommend that we use emotional regulation as a strategy in these circumstances. Number one, if your child is hitting really frequently, and so then it's just really stressful. So it's obviously, particularly if your child is hitting other siblings, it's really stressful for everyone involved, right? And so if we use emotional regulation, what that does is it gives us a good chance that the frequency of hitting will reduce, which means that we've got more time and energy to focus on the emotional awareness piece and solving the root cause of the problem, right? And so that, I do recommend it when your child is hitting really frequently. I do recommend it even if your child is hitting infrequently, but it's hitting siblings or other children. I do recommend it then, because we don't want to be in a situation where we can't keep everybody safe. It's really tricky. Like, it can be done, but it's really tricky for you to be always making sure that your child is not lashing out physically. Like, it kind of requires you to be right next to them at any time that they might hit. And that's not always predictable. So particularly if your child's hitting unpredictably, that would be another place where emotional regulation would be part of the solution. And then also, I recommend it where you can see the feelings coming. So like, you're in that emotional awareness space. So you know that your child is on the way to getting overwhelmed, but the skill level that you and your child have at sitting with that feeling while you unpack it. So having the conversation about, so your Lego got smashed and that's really upsetting. Can you tell me about like why that's important to you? That wasn't really well phrased. It kind of sounds like, it sounded a little bit cold, but it also sounded a little bit like, why would you be upset with that? Don't use it in that context, but you get what I mean, right? In that process where we're talking through it, if your child gets really upset and can't have the conversation because the feelings are too loud, then yes, we want to do that emotional regulation. So what would that look like? It would look like choosing emotional regulation activities that are easy to fit into your regular routine. And the emotional regulation activities that are the most efficient will get you the most amount of regulation for the least amount of either time or effort. We want to be able to do that for your child as part of your regular routine. If you can do it daily, that would be ideal. In some cases, daily is actually hard to achieve, and adding something to your to-do list makes you more overwhelmed, which makes you less able to do the emotional awareness and communication piece, in which case we want to ease up and just do what we can, right? So using that emotional regulation piece, that baseline emotional regulation, gives you fewer instances of hitting, so you can focus on the emotional awareness, and it gives you more time between when your child gets upset and when they are getting the impulse to hit. It gives you more time in there to have those conversations and build up their emotional awareness and their communication skills. Now, if this is a thing that you're struggling with at the moment, I highly recommend jumping into my Confident Connected Parenting program. In this course, you get all of the pieces that you need, and they're in order that will make it the most efficient way to get your child to feel more comfortable in day-to-day life. We're going to be looking at emotional regulation. We're going to be looking at emotional awareness. We're going to be looking at problem-solving skills. And so ultimately what we want to get to is a place where your child doesn't get the impulse to hit, not because they're okay to sit in yucky feelings, but actually because they know how to say, I feel upset, this is why I'm upset, and I want to work on a solution that works for everybody. So if this is something that will be useful for you, jump on into this to this course. You get pre-recorded video modules, so you can do that at your own pace. So if you want to do it really quickly, you can do that. If you want to do it a little piece at a time, that's also achievable. We also have 2 calls a month for you to come and get your personal questions answered. So anywhere where you're stuck, where you're like, I'm doing this and it's not working, or I did this and I expected this to happen, but my child reacted this way, what do I do now? That's the place where you'll get those questions answered in those live calls. So this process will take you not from a child who hits to a child who doesn't hit, but from a place of your child hits to actually your child talks about their feelings, that they come to you, or they talk to their sibling, or they talk to their other parent. They can actually advocate for themselves, and they can figure out what is the root cause of the problem. You know, of course, if your child is on the younger side of the scale, we're going to be looking more at you being their support in emotional awareness. So you being more attuned to what's going on for them and you stepping in. But the older your child gets, the more you're going to be stepping back and getting your child to have the independent skill set. This independent skill set is really important for times like when they're at daycare or school, when you're not there to support them. If you'd like to have a whole cup of tea without just having to referee a sibling dispute, and also when they're navigating differences with their other parent, like all of these skills will be really important for them to develop independently. Now, because the Confident Connected Parenting Program is an ongoing access program, so you pay once and then you have access for as long as the program exists, because of that, you can, as your child gets older, you can stay with us and work through how to help your child be more and more independent with these skills. So for a child who's hitting at 1, it will look different to a child who is, let's say they're 7, and when you're there to help them, it goes really well, but when you're not there, they struggle. That's where staying with this program, you can jump back in and say, okay, I've gotten to the point where when I help them, it works well, but they need to be able to do this more independently. We've got a whole module on helping you to build up your child's independent skill set, and as I said, those live calls will be really great for unpacking anywhere where you have unique circumstances, or your child reacts in a way that you didn't expect, or you're just stuck and it's not working. So that to jump into that course, it's jodithornton.com/confident connected parenting, and the link will be in the description of this video.